Part 4. Amidst the chaos caused by men desperately fleeing for their lives, Gazef fixed his eyes ahead of him, and then slowly drew the national treasure of the kingdom, Razor Edge. Every time he had drawn this coldly gleaming blade, he had achieved victory. In other words, this sword was the proof of Gazef's triumph. However, the sword seemed terribly weak and fragile today. He was tiny and insignificant compared to the dark young witch was charging right at him. If I let it pass me, the king's main camp is next. I need to stop it here. As he said that, Gazef's face is softened, as though he were mocking himself. There was no way for Gazef to beat that monster. Just delaying it for a second was worthy of praise. Even a man hailed as the warrior captain of the kingdom, a warrior renowned throughout the surrounding nations, could only do so much. Take his majesty and flee. Pave his way home with your lives. Gazef whispered these orders almost like a prayer to his subordinates who were not here. The strongest soldiers in the kingdom had stayed behind to protect their king. However, even if they stayed behind, they were not worthy of protecting the king from the savagery of those monsters. Even if they put their lives on the line, all they could do was serve as meat shields that would crumble after one hit. However, that was enough. They would die if the enemy hit them, but as long as they could make sure that hit was wasted on them, the king's life could be extended just a little more. Maybe it would work if 80 men were there to be shields, he thought optimistically. I'm sorry. Gazef apologized to his subordinates even as the monster approached with uncanny speed, churning up sprays of flesh and gore in its wake. He knew that an apology to absent comrades was nothing more than comforting himself. Even so, he did not want to die without having spoken those words. As he felt the earth trembling under his feet, Gazef exhaled forcefully. He gripped the sword in his hands tightly, and raised it. Compared to that vast body that crushed humans into red paste, his sword seemed utterly useless. If it were a runaway horse cart, he could easily get control of it. Even if a ferocious tiger pounced him, he could evade its first blow and strike off its head. Yet, in front of the dark young, his chances of survival seemed very low indeed. As Gazef breathed out, a dramatic change appeared in the flow of people around him. Until now they had gone in all directions, but now it seemed like they were moving to avoid Gazef. It looked as though they were creating a clear path between Gazef and the dark young. The dark young continued splattering humans under its feet as it closed in. As Gazef raised his sword, he studied its body. Where could he attack for the best results? He activated a martial art sense weakness. However, it has no weaknesses. Gazef did not know if that was because it truly had no weaknesses, or because it was so much more powerful than him that he could not read them. Still, he did not despair. He had expected that much, after all. He activated another martial art. This was a secret move that was truly worthy of being called a secret move, a technique that strengthened his extrasensory perceptions, possibility sense. The difference in their physical abilities was so vast that it made no difference if he shrunk a gap of miles by an inch or two through augmenting his own physical attributes. In that case, he decided to rely on something else. Perhaps his sixth sense might be more effective. Come, beast. The dark young seemed to have heard the challenge, and set a course straight for Gazef. The distance between the two shrank dramatically. This was the truth. Gazef was afraid. If it was at all possible, he would have liked to flee with the surrounding soldiers. Even after activating possibility sense, he could not feel anything. It was like he was enveloped by an impenetrable wall of night. As the dark young closed in, he studied its form in greater detail. Judging by the way its hooves remained undamaged, it was likely that normal swords would not be able to deal any harm to it. From the deep prints it left in the ground where it stepped, its weight would instantly kill anyone it was applied to. The more he learned about it, the more his fear of it grew. Right now, Gazef was exposed to a terror far more intense than those of the soldiers fleeing willy-nilly around him. But he could not turn back. The kingdom's strongest warrior could not flee. He cancelled possibility sense, and calmed his breathing. The dark young closed in. It was close enough that the clods of dirt kicked up by its hooves could reach Gazef. It ignored the soldiers around it, like they were nothing but crawling worms, and headed straight for Gazef. No, he was wrong. The dark young swerved to the side, like it had hit a wall. Because it had turned so quickly, the dark young's footsteps were messed up, and even with so many legs, it lost its balance. Of course, Gazef did not think it had run away from him. It had simply considered where it could find more prey and felt that it could trample more people if it turned to the side. The dark young charged past Gazef, making the world quake in its passing. Because there was only a meter or so of separation between him, the ground under his feet shook like an earthquake. Anyone but Gazef would have fallen down. He aimed at the dark young's gigantic hoof as it ran past. Yat! Gazef swung his sword. At this speed, the enemy's own velocity would become a weapon that would tear itself apart on the edge of his blade. In the instant the hoof touched the sword, a massive impact traveled up the weapon and into Gazef's arms. It made him feel as though his arms had been torn off. His feet, planted firmly in the ground, left 2 trenches in the dirt as he was dragged backward. Gua! Somehow, he had kept his grip on his sword, but pain spread through his entire body. Be it his muscles or his tendons, every part of him hurt from the stress it had to bear. Gazef panted heavily, and stared at the giant body that passed him. Not far from Gazef, one of the dark young had finally stood still as opposed to running madly. One of its tentacles became a blur. Fear shot through his body. Gazef hurriedly raised his sword. In that instant, an extraordinary impact struck him, and his body floated into the sky. Gazef could not see anything, but he guessed that he must have been slapped away by the tentacle. His body flew through the sky. After hanging in the air for a surprisingly long time, Gazef's body finally struck the earth. He rolled several times. This rolling was not the tumbling of a flung corpse, but the deliberate action of a human that was trying to bleed off the energy of his rotation. Gazef slowly stood up, spurring his ungainly body into motion. He stared at the distant dark young. It had been just one hit. The arm that took the strike had broken. It was probably sheer good luck that his sword had not snapped as well. All emotion vanished from Gazef's face. Why had he been spared? Why had it not pursued him? It was probably because it had no need to finish him off. Gazef felt that was the most appropriate answer. This was not a defeat. He had not even come anywhere close to the arena. Fresh blood flowed from his bitten lip. Following that, Gazef suppressed the intense pain which filled him and ran forth with all his might. Even if he could not beat his opponent, even if his limit was one more hit, even so, he still had to protect his king. However, his footsteps filled with conviction and determination faltered after several paces. He looked at the dark young that had changed direction toward him. There was no mistake here, and he realized why he had managed to survive. Upon the dark young, there was a king seated upon what looked like a throne made of tentacles. However, he had a bizarre face. It was skeletal, and there was no doubt that he was an undead monster. He was not nearly foolish enough not to recognize who that king was. Ainzu Gaon. Dono. So you weren't human after all. The Theocracy's special forces. Gazef had no hope of defeating them, yet they had been easily wiped out. No human could have done that, which made this realization simple to accept. Yes. Why had he even thought someone that powerful could have been human to begin with? Stronov Sama. Even before he looked back, he knew who it was by the hoarseness of the voice. The familiar pair came running toward him. Are you two all right? Klein and Brain were unhurt, and Klein's pure white armor had not been so much as stained. Considering the two of them had not tried to escape at once, that was a considerable stroke of good luck. I'm glad you're safe. I didn't think you would die, and turns out you didn't. However, it's not over yet, right? The two of them joined their lines of sight to where Gazef had been looking just now. That is, it can only be one person, Klein Kun. The monster who rules over other monsters. That is Ainzul Gaon. That is, how shall I say this? I'm sorry. At a glance, Klein's body was shuddering. His stiff, frozen expression betrayed the fact that he was not quaking in excitement or anticipation. Don't worry, Klein Kun. This is nothing to be ashamed of. Or rather, it can't be helped. A third person whose strength surpasses all rational sense. What has my life become ever since that day? Brain radiated a powerful fighting spirit. He took a stance. Gazef was surprised at his facial expression, which was casual and easy and did not suit the circumstances. I mustn't run away either. Klein and Brain stood at Gazef's side. Amidst flying chunks of meat, the dark young halted in front of Gazef. Distant screams echoed over, and only this place was silent. It was as though this area was no longer part of the world. Ainz's line of sight turned from Gazef, passed uninterestedly over Brain, and then halted on Klein. He shrugged, and looked back to Gazef. You're looking quite lively, Stronov Dono. I could say the same to you, Gaon Dono. Who? Would that be a problem, to say you're lively? After all, if you stopped being a human after we parted ways back then, it would be terribly rude. Ha. No, I have not changed since that time. Ainz floated down from the top of the dark young as he chuckled. He must have been using some sort of magical effect, given how he slowly floated down in defiance of gravity. Although he thought it might be that famous spell, Fly. After considering the fact the Ainzul Gaon was a mighty magic caster, he concluded that it must be a superior version of that spell, though how superior it was, or what kind of spell it was, Gazef did not know. Truly, it has been a long time, Stronov Dono. WushOurWorldAudio.com. Ever since Carney Village. Indeed it has, Gaon Dono. Then, permit me to ask, why have you sought me out? Could it be that you found a familiar face on the battlefield and decided to meet me? Well, yes. I don't like fancy talk, and beating around the bush is not appropriate for this place. So, I'll get right to it. Ainz slowly raised a skeletal hand. There was no enmity there, but instead, it was a gesture of friendship. Become my subordinate. In that instant, Gazef's eyes widened into circles. At the same time, one could hear Brain and Klein on both sides of him gulping audibly. Who could have imagined that such a mighty magic caster could say such a thing to him? If you do. Ainz snapped his fingers. How exactly he had done it with skeletal fingers remained a mystery. Gazef's body shuddered, as though something had been done to him. However, there had been no changes in his mind or body. He felt nothing. Look around you. Gazef turned his eyes to his surroundings. Everything was. I see. They've stopped. The dark young had all stopped in the middle of whatever they were doing. The way they hung motionless in the air, halfway through stomping down, made them look like statues. This is only temporary. What happens after this will depend on your decision. If you refuse, I will give orders to these lambs once more. I trust I don't need to tell you what those orders are. Gazef stared dumbly at Ains. Even if he forced Gazef to swear allegiance to him by using hostages, the bond would lack loyalty, and it would be courting betrayal from within. Surely Ains must have considered all of this before making his offer. Then, it meant there must have been some other reason behind his words. But what it was, Gazef did not know. Still, there had to be some reason why he, a being who could command an army like this, was interested in Gazef alone. How about it, Gazef Stronov, enter my service. Ains extended his bony hand. If he took that hand, he would save many lives. Gazef's heart wavered mightily. He had been granted the chance to save the lives of the kingdom's people. However, Gazef could not take that hand. It was a poor decision. That choice would only satisfy his ego. 100 out of 100 people would curse Gazef for a fool. Even so, Gazef could not do anything that would betray the kingdom. Gazef firmly shook his head in refusal. I refuse. I am the sword of the king. He has shown me his kindness, and I cannot compromise on this. Even if, in the end, your choice costs more lives. You risked your life to challenge a mighty foe at Kani village. Will you now throw others' lives away that you could have saved? Gazef's heart felt like it was being carved by a knife. But even then, Gazef Stronov still could not take Ains Ulgan's hand. The kingdom's warrior captain could not betray the king. That was the extent of Gazef's loyalty. His irritation building in the face of the silent Gazef, Ains shrugged. Such a foolish man. Then, Gazef did not allow him to complete the sentence, but turned his blade on Ains. What? His injuries from facing the Dark Young just now had not fully recovered, even with the power of the talisman. Even so, it was not his wounds which made the tip of his sword tremble. Gazef's entire body radiated fighting spirit. Gaundono, as one who has benefited from your kindness, I wish to apologize for this disrespectful act. I wish to request a one-on-one duel with you. Ains's face was a fleshless skull. Because of this, one could not tell what kind of expression he had, or discern what he was thinking. However, for some reason, Gazef thought he was speechless. It was the same for the two behind him. They were silent, but he could sense their consternation. Are you serious? Naturally. You will die. There is no doubt of that. If you knew, then why do so? I had no intention of killing you at first. Are you suicidal? I did not think so at first, no. What are you thinking? I cannot understand your logic. If you believed you could win and challenge me, I could understand it. If you thought there was a chance of victory under the circumstances, that would be reasonable as well. However, you firmly believe that you will lose. Have you lost the ability to make proper decisions? The enemy king stands before me, and he is within the reach of my sword. Is it not natural to see if I can take the head that presents itself? It is true that the physical distance between us is very small. However, it seems to me that there is an overwhelming gulf between us. Am I wrong? With a whoosh, the sagging tentacles of the Dark Young behind Ains snapped forth, gouging a crater into the earth beside Gazef. Even Gazef's motion-tracking vision could not follow the tentacles striking the ground beside him. That may be so, Gaundono. Are you pushing your luck because I said I did not want to kill you? Gazef laughed from the bottom of his heart. Certainly not. I simply wish to do what I, as the warrior captain of the kingdom, should do. That is all I was thinking. If I accept your challenge, you do realize I will slay you without mercy. It is only to be expected. Indeed it is. So that's how it will be. Even after I've said all this, you refuse to change your mind. What a shame. Speaking as a collector, it is a poor thing to have to destroy a rare specimen. Gazef had no intention of backing down. This was an unbelievable stroke of luck. To begin with, Ainz, who surrounded himself with incredible subordinates, was now standing alone in front of him without any bodyguards. On top of that, his pride as a mighty individual meant that he would not order the Dark Young behind him into action. He would never get a chance like this again. His enemy stood at a height that he could not reach with both hands. However, right now, he had a chance to bridge the gap between them. The next time they met, he would probably surround himself with a multitude of guards, as befitted a magic caster who was poor in close combat. Gazef would never get within sword range of Ainz again. Having considered that, he had challenged Ainz to a duel. And there was another reason for the duel. While it was a very slim chance, even so, Gazef issued his formal challenge. Saucer King Ainz ul Ga'an Dono. My name is Gazef Stronov, warrior captain of the Kingdom of Riestais. I formally request a duel with you. Gazef, warrior captain. The other two could not bear it any longer, and Brain cried out while Climb murmured. However, Gazef did not heed him and continued speaking. If you find it acceptable, Saucer King Dono, I pray you will find these two suitable witnesses for our combat. Ainz shrugged. Go Aead, it seemed to say. When Gazef realized this, he nodded. Wait a minute. Hang on, Gazef. I can always die alongside you. Don't go alone. My Lord Saucer King. Please, I beg you. I know this is shameless beyond belief, but this is a heartfelt request. Please allow us both to face you. I know it won't inconvenience you in the slightest. As he heard Brain's strangled plea, Gazef thought, as I expected. The carefree expression he had seen on Brain's face then was that of a warrior that had embraced his fate. He had long since resolved himself to die beside Gazef at the hands of Ainz ul Ga'an. However, he did not accept it. He could not accept it. Brain Unglaus. Do you wish to stain my conviction as a warrior? Brain's face was a picture of shock. That is fine, Stronov Dono. I don't mind taking you two on at once. Please don't, Saucer King Dono. This duel is with me. You two, stay out of it. The pinpoints of red light floating in Ainz's skeletal eye sockets glowed even brighter. I see. I've seen those eyes before. They are the eyes of a man who has embraced his death and advances anyway. Firm, unyielding eyes. I admire them. Ainz was speaking like a human being. Very well. I accept your proposal. I will duel PvP, Stronov Dono. Brain's knees crumpled, and he collapsed to the ground. His low-hanging face could not be seen, but droplets of rain spattered the crimson earth below him. I'm sorry, Gazef told Brain in his heart. The corpse will be returned intact. It will facilitate the use of resurrection magic. There is no need for that. Gazef's words left both his friends and enemy speechless. I do not wish to be brought back to life. You may dispose of the body here if you wish. It was not that resurrection magic was bad. However, Gazef disliked it. Everyone only had one life. That was why the decision to stake one's life meant so much. In addition, he could not come back from the dead, for the sake of the kingdom. If Gazef died, then the king could spread the news that he had lost an important subject. That way, the king could temper the hatred and resentment which the people would feel towards the royal family for all the deaths in this battle. This was a final act of loyalty from the kingdom's warrior captain, who had chosen to act selfishly. Ignoring the surprised stares around him, Gazef smiled calmly. Then, let us begin. You two, I hope you will bear witness to my final battle. Climb could not have imagined that the man called Brain Unglaus could have shown such a fragile side of himself. The Brain he knew was strong, free-spirited and untouchable. However, he saw no traces of that in the man whose head was lowered. Even so, he did not think Brain was weak. Brain, will you not complete this duty? Gazef spoke these words without looking back. Brain refused to move. The way his hands clawed at the ground conveyed his regret to Climb. Even so, Climb had to say it. This is Stronov Sama's wish. He did not think Gazef Stronov could win at all. That was why Climb and Brain had to fulfill Gazef's request. Slowly, Brain rose to his feet. It was hot. Climb nearly turned tail and ran. There seemed to be some kind of hot air propelling Brain upwards. How many times have I made you see the disgraceful side of myself, Climb-kun? I'm fine now. I'll scorch Gazef's noble form into my eyes. Thank you. What kind of relationship did Brain Unglaus and Gazef Stronov have? Climb could not understand the bond between them, especially on Brain's side. After losing to Gazef, he had embarked on a journey to advance his sword skills. This was the Brain that Climb knew. However, he did not think their relationship was that simple. Then, Stronov Dono, could you let me take a look at that sword? I wish to quickly look over it. Ainda made that request like he was asking about the weather. Enchanted swords could have all kinds of abilities imbued into them. Examining one would be like revealing the inner workings of one's strategy. By common sense, nobody would ever agree to that proposal. Climb was not the only person who had thought that way, which was why Brain's eyes also went wide at what happened next. Gazef turned his sword a full 180 degrees and presented the hilt to Ains. Gazef, have you completely given up on winning? Brain, don't say such rude things. The Saucer King is nothing like that. Ains held the sword and cast a spell. After that, he laughed happily. What a marvelous sword! Ains returned the sword to Gazef hilt first the same way it had been given to him. Stronov Dono, how much of this sword's power do you know? I fully understand it. This sword has an unreal sharpness that can cut metal like paper. Incorrect. That is only a fraction of the sword's power. What? What do you mean, Saucer King Dono? Well, in short, this sword is a weapon that can kill me. Something like that is the absolute minimum condition for a duel. Without a weapon that can harm me, this would be nothing more than an execution. Sorry for comparing you to the rats that entered my fortress. Ains muttered as he suddenly produced a short sword out of thin air. Without hesitation, he dragged the edge of the gleaming blade across his face in a forceful slice. However, it did not leave so much as a scratch. Weakly enchanted objects like this cannot harm this body of mane. Incidentally, this short sword is imbued with about as much data, or rather, as much mana as that sword you bear, Stronov Dono. However, your sword can harm me, in clear defiance of what I know to be true. Could I request that sword after I win? Gazef smiled thinly. Forgive me for refusing, but this sword is a national treasure. PvP under the pretext of returning dropped items, then. Very well. My deepest thanks, Saucer King Dono. After returning the sword to Gazef, Ains stroked his chin in thought. He backed up, one step at a time, as though conforming to some regulated distance between them. I think this should be about 5 meters. And, because there's no countdown, we will need a signal. You, in the white armor, find something to start us off. Having been suddenly named, Climb shuddered. Climb, please. I have a magical handbell here. I'll ring it, and it will signal the start. The two of them nodded silently to Climb's proposal. Gazef raised his sword, pointing it at his enemy's eyes. Strength suffused every fiber of his being. In the eyes of Climb, who stood behind him, Gazef's body seemed to grow larger before his eyes. This was an overwhelming fighting spirit. He had never seen the true pressure the kingdom's warrior captain could exert. Yet, his body seemed distant and illusory, like a mirage. Stronov Sama. This was the last time he would see Gazef alive. It's not guaranteed. Suddenly, Brain denied Climb from where he stood beside him. There's no guarantee Gazef will lose. The chances are extremely low, but there's still a chance of victory. That guy has a killer move, you know. The martial art he uses is a trump card. The sixfold slash of light. Brain smiled quietly. No. It's an ultimate martial art that far surpasses it. That fellow learned it. Is that so? As Climb prepared his handbell, he looked to Gazef's raised sword, and the profile of his face, which was filled with the utmost focus. It was the steely face of the man hailed as the warrior captain, renowned in the surrounding countries. Yes, it came from a former adamantite-ranked adventurer of the kingdom. It was a martial art invented by Vistiakoff Dilafan, but he could not use it because of his advanced age. If my greatest secret move, Nail Clipper, is the result of using multiple martial arts at once, Gazef's trump is the strongest single technique. Who knows, that blow. It might even be able to reach Ainzu or Gaon. Perhaps that was why he had asked for a one-on-one duel, Brain muttered. His eyes did not leave the scene before him for an instant. Climb swallowed. The hand holding the bell felt heavy. Once he rang it, Gazef's fate would be sealed. Want to swap with me? Thank you, but I'll do it. Is that so? Brain mumbled, but he did not say anything else. Climb raised the bell. He could only pray that victory went to Gazef. And then louder than expected the bell rang. His consciousness focused to the absolute limit. Gazef stepped in with an unbelievable speed. Without missing a single moment, Brain and Climb opened their eyes and watched. And before any of them, the world went quiet. I see. So time-stop countermeasures are important, after all. Because Ainz had instantly cast a silent time-stop, Gazef was frozen in front of Ainz, his sword raised high. No attack would work while time was stopped. Even if he used attack magic to barrage Gazef, it would cause him no harm. Because of that, Ainz cast a spell while keeping track of the time. Delay magic, True Death. This was a 9th-tier spell. He did not use it often because Grasp Heart was a more convenient spell. If no spell could affect an enemy while time stopped, then all one need to do was delay the activation of the spell until the moment the spell ended. Although it was a basic combination attack, the timing for it was extremely difficult. As such, only about 5% of all magic users could pull it off. Naturally, after much trying and practice, Ainz was one of them as well. Farewell, Gazef Stronov. I never hated you. The spell ended, and time returned to the world. Before anything else could happen, the spell took effect. Gazef slowly fell. What? Climb and Brain had no idea of what had just happened. In the moment Gazef had stepped forward, he had suddenly fallen over. Ainz caught Gazef's body. His sword fell from nerveless fingers, and fell to the ground. The battle was over. Yet, they could not understand it. Nobody knew what was going on. What on earth happened? The hell should I know? Brain gave voice to an angry cry. What's wrong? Get up, Gazef. However, Brain's earnest hope was coldly denied. He is dead. Respectfully, perhaps even reverently, the Saucer King Ainz laid Gazef upon the ground. After that, he slowly closed the man's wide-open eyes. While looking at Gazef's face, he spoke to the two people nearby. Seeing how he made a challenge with no chance of winning reminded me of that time. As a sign of respect for the warrior captain, I will call off the Dark Young. His body will be returned to you after it is properly prepared. No, there's no need for that. We will bring Gazef back. There's no need to trouble you. Climb exhaled heavily. Would Brain challenge Ainz to a hopeless battle? He wondered, however, there was no need for that. Is that so? Ainz replied before standing back up. The instant death spell I used, True Death, will invalidate lower-tier resurrection magic. Tell this to the people of the kingdom. Tell them I will be merciful to those who submit respectfully." Ainz lightly floated into the air. Even as they saw his defenseless back, the two of them knew they could not commit a shameful act like attacking from behind. Ainz sat on the tentacles of the Dark Young. It was truly a terrifying throne. "Cede Rantel and the surrounding areas to me without delay, and these lambs will not frolic through the royal capital. Tell the king this when you see him again." The Dark Young turned and left, and the other 4 Dark Young also began making their way back to the Imperial Castrum. "Climb Kun, I have one request. Could I bring Gazef Dono back?" "Very well. Then I will bring Stronov Sama's sword home. A lot of people died." "Yeah, too many to count." "What just happened?" "I don't know. But, if someone as powerful as that calls himself a king and claims this territory, I'm sure that in the future, a war will definitely break out. And who knows, the dead may outnumber the corpses here today." Walking behind Brain, who was carrying Gazef on his back, Clim's thoughts turned to the future of the kingdom, which was wreathed in dark clouds. Brain's words would definitely come true. What was important was what he could do, and then, what he would do. And the most important thing was, I have to protect Rena Sama. Clim clenched his fist, and made up his mind. At the very least, he had to protect his mistress, no matter the cost. End chapter.